Hello and welcome to the audio version of the Negotiation Briefer Outreach Strategies. Today we'll be having a conversation with Dr. Paul Williams to discuss how to design an effective media strategy. This recording is an audio complement to the written publication Negotiation Briefer Outreach Strategies available on the PILPG website and is intended to offer some additional context to the briefing material and to share an insider's view of the topics. As I mentioned, I'm here today with Dr. Paul Williams, the founder and president of the Public International Law and Policy Group, or PILPG, who holds the Rebecca Grazier Professorship in Law and International Relations at American University. PILPG is a global pro bono law firm providing free legal assistance and policy planning support to parties involved in peace negotiations, drafting post-conflict constitutions, and prosecuting atrocity crimes. Dr. Williams has over 30 years of experience assisting 36 parties to peace negotiations, and today he's here to share some insights from his experiences in assisting delegations with developing a negotiation strategy. This series has been all about being in the room, negotiating with opposing parties, being up late at night, working with your team and back channeling with others. But today we're talking about interacting with the media and managing your party's media strategy. Still a critical member of the delegation, but one that requires its own preparatory conversation. Any lawyer listening may know that lawyers and legal advisors can be asked to wear many hats at a time when representing various clients, and often have to become quick experts on niche topics. So today I wanted to chat with you, Paul, from the perspective of a legal advisor who needs to be read up on how to assemble a media team and develop a media strategy before going into negotiations. And to get read up quickly. Now, I'm lucky enough to be able to call you and bring with me some questions that I think others similarly situated would have. I've been jotting down some things and I would be curious about or to hear from you to help me get up to speed on all things media related, having never worked in the industry. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for joining, Paul.
Oh, thank you, Nicole. It's my pleasure.
To kick us off, my guess is that when parties are heading into negotiations, the first thing they consider are their positions, including their red lines and best alternatives, as we've discussed in some other negotiation briefers. If I'm appointed, say, as a legal advisor to such a delegation heading into these talks, when do I start considering my media strategy?
Nicole, you want to start considering your media strategy and working with the delegation the moment you're asked to join a delegation and provide support. For some strange reason, the delegations that I've worked with in the past have oftentimes turned to me as the lawyer and said, can you help us build a media team? Can you help us build a media strategy? And the first time this happened, I scratched my head and I said, sure, but you do know I'm the lawyer, right? I'm here to help you draft the ceasefire and draft the Constitution. I said, yeah. But you speak for a living. You write words for a living. You can work with our media team in order to have them be more effective. And again, lawyer, your profession is part of your profession is persuasion, and that's the same as the media. And so somewhat surprisingly, I found myself very early on providing assistance to the media team. And the thing I learned is you start from the moment you're appointed as the legal advisor and the moment they've asked you to help build a media team, because media, managing, communicating, interacting, manipulating the media is as crucial as any other element of the peace process.
Okay, so we're starting early and it's important, but what is my first step on approaching the media and a media strategy?
There's two initial steps, Nicole, that the delegation you're advising will want to take. The first is to have a specially designated media team, and to have this media team be a hybrid of those that are affiliated with the delegation, as well as some professional external media individuals that have a capacity to manage the media. Because, and we can talk a little about this more if we have time, every single individual who goes to the peace negotiations will be drawn like a moth to light to the microphone. They'll want to talk to the media. They'll want to shape the press coverage. They'll want to tweet. They'll want to post on Facebook. And you need to have a professionally designed and created and assembled team. And then the second thing is you need to grant that media team the exclusive authority to speak with the media and to allow members of the delegation under special exception or at special request to speak with the media. A chair of negotiation cannot be controlling the negotiation across the table, controlling the negotiation within the own delegation, and also have to be worrying about what's happening out there with her delegation in the media. Negotiations are multi-dimensional chess. This is one dimension you need to remove from the equation.
Interesting, Paul. So what does the media person then do on a day-to-day basis to stay on top of all these responsibilities that you've just mentioned?
The media person during a negotiation doesn't get any sleep. They have a number of tasks. One, they have to know just about everything that's happening in the negotiations so that they don't make a mistake and unintentionally provide misleading information to the media. If they answer, I don't know, I'm not really sure, they give mistaken information, they'll lose credibility with the media, and your delegation will lose its voice. They then have to know what it is they can and cannot share with the media. So not only everything that's happening, but okay, what they can share with the media, what they can't share with the media. And then they have to know the narratives, which may or may not be accurate, but are which the delegation would like to share to the media. So there's the truth, there's the secrets, and then there's your version of the truth as the media professional. And as the media team, you need to be 24/7 available to the delegation so that if they need to get a narrative out or to get a counter narrative or to respond to something that the other side is about to say or has said, they know where their media person is. At the same time, you have to be 24/7 available to the media because they're all responding in quick turnaround periods of time in the moment. Not only will there be a daily press briefing likely, but there's also constant communication on social media and strategic communication platforms that they'll want to quote. And if you're not around to give a quote, the other side will have a quote, the mediator will have a quote, and the representative from your party was not available for comment, and the media will just move quickly. So it's a very intense and stressful position. And I think it's also important to bear in mind, you're not just communicating to the media, you are an integral part of the delegation's approach to winning at these negotiations, to getting to yes, to protecting their interests. As much as you need an expert, as much as you need a lawyer, as much as you need a chairperson, a scribe, et cetera, that media person is a key member of achieving the delegation's objectives. No pressure.
I was about to say that sounds like a lot of pressure for one person. Do most spokespeople actually survive the length of the negotiations?
Actually, Nicole, it's interesting you ask that question because although most media individuals may have incredible stamina to survive the negotiation, they are one of the handful of positions that are expendable on purpose. Whenever you're brought in as a media representative, or if you're a member of the delegation and you're designated to be the spokesperson, you literally have to hand in your resignation at the same point in time that you hand in your acceptance of that role. Because if for whatever strategic or even tactical reason, the chairperson of the delegation needs to pivot or cast blame or somehow deflect intense criticism from their own constituents, the media person is somebody who is expendable because they're not in the negotiations and they haven't been building the relationships and the trust and the playing the other roles inside the room where you'd be at a disadvantage if that person was then relieved. But the media person and the media people know this. And same with the lawyers, blame it on the lawyers, blame it on the media people. And we all know that at a moment's notice, we can be removed from the delegation as a way of helping the delegation pursue its strategic and its tactical interests. And I've seen it so many times where they've simply said, this was misrepresented by our spokesperson. We're changing out our spokesperson and bringing some new personality and new energy to the fray. And it's completely tactical and completely strategic.
Still a lot of pressure. So best of luck to those listening or aspiring CJ Craigs out there. Going back to the media person's roles and responsibilities, something that I'm familiar with are the daily press briefings. Do they, in fact, really happen daily? And what's covered in these?
So oftentimes a negotiation structure will create a daily press briefing by the mediator, and then there will be an effort to constrain what the parties may say to the public, to their constituents. A party involved in a negotiation should respect that period of time, be it 4 p.m, 5, or a noon briefing, that the mediator holds. But the party should never surrender its own right of free speech, its own right to speak to their constituents. And we can talk about this a little bit. If you're in Geneva, if you're in Rambouillet, or if you're in Addis Ababa, you're oftentimes isolated from your constituents. And so you need your spokesperson to speak to your constituents and tell them what's happening in these negotiations. You also need to speak to the international community to provide them assurances that you're committed to the process, and also to prepare them for the implementation of the agreement, or to prepare the international community for the breakdown of an agreement. So as a delegation, you should always make clear to the mediation team that you will be respectful of their framing of the negotiation and their time frame for communicating, but you will be in 24/7 contact with the media, because you need to be able to have your voice heard with your constituents and the international community. And you can do that through a daily formal briefing. One thing that's been very effective is to do morning briefings about what you think might be happening over the course of the day, because then you set the talking points. It's customary to do it in the evening at the end of a day. But if you do a morning press briefing and saying, our delegation is prepared today to go in and talk about security sector reform, and we want to see this and this on behalf of the Army and the paramilitary forces, you're beginning to structure the narrative for the day. And then those are the questions that they'll ask the mediators and the opposing party. So you're always looking to gain and to push the initiative, and your media team is crucial in that.
Mentioned that these briefings, the spokesperson is speaking to the constituents back home as well as to the international community. Who else is attending these briefings?
Members of the other delegation. So when you do a press briefing, there's the press, there's the video press, there's the written press, there's the audio, the radios. There's also civil society. Civil society will frequently attend press briefings so that they can get information and they can relay it to their constituents, which ideally are your constituents as well. But the other delegation members or representatives of the other delegation will be at your press briefing so that they can get a sense of your vibe with the press. And so they are on hand for instantaneous counter quotes and counter arguments. So obviously, your delegation should have members of their media team, and maybe even, a few others, a civil society that are affiliated with your delegation, at the other side's briefing. Now, oftentimes folks will say, no, that'll add legitimacy to the opposing party, or who knows what reason why. No. The game is afoot. It's in the delegation meetings, it's in your press briefings, and it's in the opposing party's press briefings. So you need to be there in order, again, to be 24/7 pushing your narrative.
And your team should be at the other or the opposing party's briefings as well, then.
Yes, most definitely.
So we mentioned the briefings and the giving a voice to the constituencies. Any other responsibilities of the press team?
The press team will drink a lot of coffee. And the reason I say this is the journalists have downtime. And when the journalists have downtime, they spend it in the coffee shops. They need to be nearby the Palais in Geneva or the Chateau in Rambouillet or in other places. And if your media team has a person who's specially designated to simply hang about and socialize with the other journalists, you build the relationship. They know that they have a inside source, a go-to person, somebody who will return their phone calls. They'll go and they'll get the quotable quotes at the press briefings. They'll call the spokesperson for the quotable quote. But if they have a mid or a junior level member of the media team who simply says, my job is to be available for you if you've got any questions or need quick response, or if you need to get in touch with the spokesperson. Because what you don't want to have happen is, oh, we couldn't get in touch with the spokesperson of your delegation, and we're running a quote which is harmful to your interest from the other delegation, and we're going to say you couldn't be reached. You're like, nope, I'm here. I'm drinking coffee with you. I'm not really sure what the other quote was, but they're lying. And so whatever they say, I'm saying the opposite, and you can quote me on that. And so it gives that continual presence, not only physically with the other journalist, but your delegation is then continually present in the written, in the radio, and in the televised dimensions of the agreement. And if you don't fill that space, other members of the delegation will, and that's very destabilizing for the cohesion of the delegation.
Now, you also mentioned earlier that parties oftentimes intentionally or sometimes leak information through their press team. How and why does the press team do this?
So the press team has a level of idiosyncrasy credit that they build up. So maybe they build up 20 points by always being truthful, always being responsive, always getting the information that they need. And the media knows, though, that every once in a while, there's going to be a spin. Always there's a spin. And sometimes there's a fairly dramatic spin. You can never lie. You can never misstate the facts. But you can occasionally put more of a spin on your argument than you normally do. And you can get away with that. And you can use it to promote the objectives of your delegation, so long as you've built up those 20 units of idiosyncrasy credit by being responsive, being clear, being articulate, giving the media folks, what they need, which is not a 30-minute lecture. They need 6 sound bites that they can pick 3 that they use in their reporting. That then gives you the ability to push them the extra mile a little bit. Also, every single question the media asks you is an opportunity to push your agenda. One of the things that the media are quite fond of is what they call color. Give us some examples of what's happening in there, in the chateau, in the palais, in the negotiating room, things along those lines. That's an opportunity to legitimize your delegation and, quite frankly, delegitimize or undermine the other delegation. I shouldn't tell too many stories, but during one of the negotiations, there was an interest in delegitimizing the other side, as well as one of the mediators that was being not terribly helpful. This mediator had requested that a piano be brought into the chateau. And so one of the journalists asked me for some reason, I don't know, because I was the lawyer, they said, so I hear that they brought a piano into the chateau and that's supposed to be relaxing the environment. Oh, no, it's awful. This particular mediator, he bangs on this piano nonstop. And the other delegation gets drunk and sings drinking songs on the piano, around the piano. Our team is over here trying to negotiate a ceasefire and a power sharing arrangement and be serious. And you've got late night karaoke going on, led by one of the mediators. And this showed up in the press. And of course, they were mad as all get out. But the delegation that we were representing was being delegitimized as disorganized and unprofessional and non-state armed actors showing up in their camouflage, et cetera. And so this was a way of using a simple question about, oh, how's that piano working out? To say, oh, look, our team of non-state armed actors are pretty darn serious. And the government delegation and the mediator are having a little too much fun at these negotiations, and they should actually get serious. Part of this was the talks were likely to break down and did break down. And this was part of that momentum of our delegation was focused. They were serious. These talks did not break down because of lack of seriousness. Our guys were not singing at the piano bar. It was the other side.
Sounds like a story you'd only see in the movies. You also mentioned that the spokesperson is responsible for ensuring a consistent narrative. How does this person ensure that all information goes through them, not only controlling the flow of information, but ensuring that the narrative going to the media is consistent, especially in this day and age of Twitter and social media? It sounds like a lot to keep track of.
It's important that the chair of the delegation spend 15 minutes every morning with the media person. There's so many things that have to happen before the delegation goes into the meeting, but you've got to spend those 15 minutes with your media spokesperson so that they can then fill up the next 3 or 4 hours of talking to the media, back channeling, back briefing, providing background, et cetera, and being in line with any pivot. If you come in and say, we expect total disarmament of the paramilitaries, and the media goes out and says that, and then you start to be in late night conversations with your own delegation and with back channel negotiations with the other side, you start to say, maybe those government paramilitaries that we want disbanded could be absorbed into the regular army. You don't want your media person out there saying yesterday's talking point. You want to essentially say, hey, look, there may be some movement today on the disbanding, demobilization of the paramilitaries. So talk about power sharing, talk about natural resources, talk about federalism today to give us space to see if that goes anywhere. We'll let you know at the end of the day if we did begin to make a pivot, and then you can back channel through some late night phone calls to the journalists and say, hey, just wanted to give you a quick briefing that there may be some evolution on this particular topic of demobilizing the paramilitaries. It's now going to be integrating the paramilitaries. And that gives credibility of your media team, but they have to be in the know in order to carry them along. And so when they break it first, you want credit for every positive development. And if your spokesperson breaks it first or in parallel to the mediation, then you're seen as the delegation which is getting things done. Even if that thing that you're getting done is making a compromise from your initial position, the media will report it in a way that if your name is attached to it, if your spokesperson from your delegation is the one who's announcing this or sharing this, then you're getting credit for being innovative and moving the process towards a quote unquote getting to yes.
So a lot of internal communication before you go to the public. It's definitely a lot to keep track of. Last but not least, how do you know if your media strategy is going well or going really poorly, or how it's being perceived by your constituents, especially if they're far away, as you mentioned?
As kids, we are always told we watched too much TV and we should go outside and play. So it's always a little surprising when I advise our delegation. It's like, now don't forget, we all got to spend half an hour tonight watching TV, listening to the radio. And I guess nowadays you don't say turn off the TV, you say put down the iPhone. It's literally the opposite. Spend a half an hour every night scrolling through the various social media platforms and newspapers, et cetera, on your iPhone to see how the narrative is shaping. And to realize there's the domestic narrative, your constituents in the local language newspapers, the audience that you're trying to let them know that although you're in Geneva or you're in Paris or you're in New York or wherever, and you're staying at a 5-star hotel, that you're actually doing the work of the constituents and trying to get to yes. Because oftentimes there's still a battle going on in country. And so you have to be careful about how that narrative is being shaped. And you can only do that by tracking it. But you also want to follow the international. If you're looking to have sustainability of a peace process by international monitoring, by peacekeepers, by a World Bank, conflict trust fund, you're going to want to be able to be bringing the international community along so that they see, oh, these non-state armed actors or this government in exile. Yeah, we can do business with them. Or the civil society who's now become civilian leadership. Yeah, we can do business with them. They're reliable partners in peace. And so you want to make sure that although you're negotiating fiercely within the delegation room to get your needs and your interests met, you want to be projecting that you're a partner in peace with the international community so that when you do get a peace agreement and you need the international assistance, financial or otherwise, to implement it, that they're keen on engaging with you. And even, quite frankly, you need to manage the domestic population in countries that are key contributors financially or to security mechanisms, because they'll have to go back to their constituents. The UN has no constituents. The UN mediator mediates an agreement and says, oh, but other countries, regional countries or countries that have a strong international presence will be asked to write a check to implement these peace processes or these peace agreements. And you want their constituents to at least heard of and have a positive perception.
So important, and so many audiences we don't think of when thinking about our first media strategy. Well, this is everything that I was initially curious about when it comes to the media and peace negotiations. Anything else I don't know that would be helpful to the delegations?
Now, Nicole, one of the relatively underestimated value of a media team is defense. We've spent some time talking about how you use the media team to offensively pursue your strategy, to engage in tactical maneuvers, to help your delegation get to yes, help your delegation get to a sustainable peace. But you need to be highly proactive. So if you need to go on the defensive, that you've got those relationships with the media and you've got the team in place to go. I have been surprised that on more than one occasion, when I've been representing a party which is clearly the victim of genocide, atrocity crimes, where their capital city has been under siege, the mediator will come to that party, which will be seeking very reasonable provisions in a constitution, in a ceasefire, in an agreement. And the mediator will come and say, these talks are about to collapse. And I'm going to go in front of those journalists and I'm going to tell them that the talks are collapsing because of you, that it's your fault. And there's two ways in both of these instances. There were two ways that the delegation was able to respond and push back and literally say, I dare you. I dare you to go in front of those cameras and try to blame it on us. Because one of the dimensions was they had deep relationship with the journalists. And if the mediator were to go and try to put the blame on the victim party, the journalists wouldn't have stood for it. They would have said, we've been in the loop from day one on these proposals that they're putting forward. Clearly, it can't be their fault. They're asking for human rights protections. They're asking for war crimes prosecution. They're asking for power sharing. What is so bad about that? And the journalists knew the language. They knew enough of the details of the negotiations. The second thing is each of those had a champion in the home country government of the mediator, where basically if the mediator would have gone out and said, because mediators all have home countries, and said, blaming it on whomever, they would have had an equivalent senator, former secretary of state, come out and say, well, actually, I'm in daily contact with the delegation. And no, that's not what's happening on the ground. And I have no idea why my countryman, who's as a mediator, is blaming it on them. That's not media related, but it's important to guard against the media being used against you, is to have your own champions who could backstop you.
That sounds like one high stakes game of chicken if I've ever heard it.
Well, Nicole, sometimes you just have to have fun in interacting with the media. Because if you've built up a relationship with the media and they know that you're a go-to party or a member of the delegation that they can get inside scoop, at critical junctures in time, you can utilize them to pursue your strategic interest. I was involved in one negotiation and our party was under a lot of pressure to make concessions because the mediator was pitching to the media that accommodation, moral equivalence, all sides are responsible, both sides are making concessions. And our team had submitted a proposal, our delegation had submitted a proposal, which used the neutral language for both parties, had a chapter on human rights, and had a chapter on international assistance with local policing and security. The other delegation gave a counter proposal where they had changed the neutral language and had used a highly derogatory form of language to refer to our party, had deleted the human rights annex and had deleted the security for local populations annex. We dug out the old Microsoft Word version and did a compare and contrast. We did a red line version of this. And when you ran the red line, it basically took the neutral language for the two parties and put in this pejorative language, and then lined out every single line of the human rights annex and lined out every single line of the local security annex. We could have just said they deleted it, but no, we wanted it redlined. And then we went to the press briefing and we passed out 3 or 4 copies of this. It wasn't necessarily confidential. It was our proposal and the counter proposal of the other delegation. And the chair had said, Paul, you're the lawyer. You go and you pass this out to a few of our friends in the media and say, look, this is the current status of the proposal. This is our delegation's proposal, and this is the response. Now, I didn't say, I was a little opaque as to whether or not their response was the crossed everything out, or their response just said, delete the annex. And the media went with it. They were highly antagonistic towards the mediator who had been leading them on that, oh, both sides are constructively engaged, because that actually wasn't true. One party wanted to get rid of human rights protections and get rid of local security mechanisms. And this empowered the media to hold the mediator more accountable for a legitimate and accurate description of the power relationship within the delegation, and relieved the pressure on our delegation that he was going to go out and blame it on them for the collapse of the peace process. So this was their retaliation for him saying, we're going to blame the collapse of the peace process on you. They basically put out, this is what we're negotiating, and is it our fault for seeking human rights protections and local security mechanisms for the local population?
Well, that's certainly a story of using the media to your advantage that I'm sure many will like to hear. Thank you so much for joining today. As someone who hasn't worked with the media too much, I can certainly say that this was really helpful. I hope that those listening can say the same.
Thanks, Nicole. I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to our next conversation.